Well, here we are then at the wonderful Horcott Lakes in the Cotswold Water Park, and today I'm going to be giving you a little insight into how I go about finding the perfect spot. So without further ado, I'm going to get the kit unloaded and we'll get into it. The first thing you need to take into consideration when you're looking for a spot is your hardware. Now here I've got a spod rod which has got a stiffer test curve than a normal fishing rod, which means it's got a faster recovery speed and obviously a stiffer tip, which when you're feeling around on the lake bed out there you get a much more positive indication. Now coming down from the spod rod we have got the spod reel, and you'll notice that's loaded with a braided main line as opposed to mono. And that is because braid has zero stretch, so everything you're feeling through that braid is going to be a lot more accurate than what mono would give you. And you'll also see on there I've got a shock leader. Now the reason why I'm using a shock leader is because the braided main line is really thin in diameter, and if you're fishing at extreme ranges you need that thicker shock leader to absorb the power of the cast. When it comes to the shock leader itself, I'll use quite a specific length, so I want the loop on the end of the shock leader, which your lead and your spom's going to go to in line with the spigot, and then coming down to the reel I always have 4 turns on the reel, and having that 4 turns on there, when you do give it that big one, if you're fishing out at range, that's going to take the grunt of the cast and ensure you don't crack off. And then lastly, coming down from there, I've got a big loop as you can see here, and I've actually tied a second loop onto the bottom of that loop. And that basically enables me to change between leads a lot quicker, or if I want to put my spom on, I can literally just pull that tag end, flip the lead off, clip my spom on, and away I go. And as you can see there, I've got a little lead on the end at the minute. I always prefer using a small lead, the smallest I can get away with, to start feeling around in the swim, before then changing over to a grappling lead, which we'll get onto a little bit later. But using a smaller lead like this, it doesn't get clogged up in the weed as bad as say a 4-ounce lead was. So I can lead around out there for a lot longer without actually getting snagged up in too much debris on the bottom. The last thing that's very important is this, a finger stool. Because you're using a braided main line, the last thing you want to do is give it the big un and that braid slips, and in return it is like cheese wire and it will make a nasty wound in your finger. So for me, a finger stool is an absolute must. And yeah, that's basically the setup. So I think first things first, we're going to have a lead around out there, see if I can locate some areas, and then get some rods out a little bit later. Lovely out there. When I'm leading around out there, the most important thing that I always make sure I do is feel the lead down. And what I mean by that is when I cast out, I will trap the braid before the lead hits the water and then hold it on a tight line and follow it down ever so slowly with the rod tip on that tight line. So then when the lead hits the bottom, I'll get some sort of response off of the rod tip. The harder the response, so if it really cracks down, the chances are it's on something like gravel, sand or clay. If it's a little bit softer, muffled or no drop at all, then I'm going to be in either weed or silt. The next thing to do is I tighten up to the lead while it's on the bottom, and I generally point my rod tip fairly low to the water surface, hold it on that tight line and then just draw the tip back really slowly. And as you can see there was a little bit of resistance to begin with, and then there was a nice gentle glide, which says to me that there's a little bit of silt out there. Unless when I bring it in, the lead says any different with some weed on the end, I think that's an area of silt, and you'll get a much better understanding of what's on the lake bed. And if you're still struggling, have a look in the margins, and if there's areas of clay, gravel, weed or silt, just drop your lead in and then repeat the process, and you'll get a much better understanding of how that feels. Obviously gravel, you'll get lots of sharp taps on the rod tip, silt will be smooth, weed, the rod will completely lock up, and it will give you a much better understanding of what you're actually landing on out in the lake. So I'm just going to have a couple of casts out there now and see what we've got. I don't need to fish massively far out in this swim. See, that was quite a soft drop, which says to me it's either in a bit of low-lying weed, because I did get a drop, or some silt. After having a few casts, it's quite evident that there's a lot of weed out there, but I have found a lovely smooth area. So what I've done is I've chucked it back out to the spot, give it a little glide, and where it's felt best, I'm now going to use the line clip on my reel. And basically all I'll do is thread the braid under the clip, lock that in place, and then that means when I wind in and re-chuck it out there, I'm going to hit the clip and be on the same spot every single time. So I'm just going to double check that the spot's nice. Now that it's in that clip, hit the clip, soft drop onto the bottom, and then just hold it on a tight line, bring that back, lovely and smooth. Perfect. So I've had a few casts around the area now in that clip, and what I've been doing is just trying to figure out how big the spot actually is. So I've been casting, sort of like staggering it along, see where the weed starts on both sides. And what I've found is I've got an area out there that's probably around a rod length in width, which is absolutely perfect for getting a few rods on. And I think what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to have one more cast just to double check that I'm not talking absolute waffle. And then I'm going to change over from this normal lead. Yeah, that's lovely out there. Well, at the minute it feels lovely. I'm going to change over from this normal lead to a grappling style lead, which has prongs on it. And anything that is out there on that lake bed, if there's any detritus on the bottom, them prongs will definitely pick that up, and it will give me an even better understanding of what's out there. Because I know if the prongs come back clean, then I can present literally anything on there. But if there's a little bit of chod or some lower lying weed that I'm maybe not feeling with a bare lead, then I know I'm going to have to change my approach to suit. So yeah, I'm going to pop this on just like that, easy as that, with the extra loop, and see what it's saying. Even more positive thud down, because obviously it's a bigger lead, and we'll tighten up to it and then give it a pull. And to me that feels absolutely bang on. And as you can see, the lead is clean as a whistle, and it's got a slight metallic smell to it, which normally suggests silt. So my suspicions were true, and I think as long as I use reasonably light leads, I can present in that no problem whatsoever, because there's obviously not loads of leaf matter down there that's gonna ruin my presentation, or if it's some weed on the way in. But yeah, I think that's gonna be a good starting area. So what we're gonna do now is get the wrapping sticks out and wrap it up. Now it's time to find out exactly how far out that spot is, and the way to do that is by using some wrap sticks. And what they basically are just sort of bank sticks, if you like, without threads on them. And what I do is I'll place my rod on the floor, and I know that my rod's 12 foot, which is 4 yards. So I'll put a stick at either end, and then I'll wrap in a figure of 8 motion around the sticks until I get to my clip, which will then deter how far out I'm fishing, and then I can match that with my fishing rods. So there we go, that's just over 8.5 wraps. And what I'm going to do is put a little stick in the ground, just so I know exactly where to clip my fishing rods up to, and then I'll be bang on the money every single time. One thing I always do once I've found my spot and I'm happy with it is I will line it up with something on the far margin. Now this horizon marker will serve you two purposes. Obviously consistent accuracy, because you're always drilling it down the same hole, but also at night. So generally it will be some trees, a group of trees, a dip in the tree, or if there's any street lights that may be in the background, or any sort of landmark really, anything that's going to silhouette in the hours of darkness. So if you do get a bite, you're definitely going to be drilling it down the same hole even in the hours of darkness. Oh, that is filth. My spot choices vary dramatically all throughout the year. Now in the spring and the summer, I'm looking for the hardest area I can find. These are areas that are obviously being fed on and polished off on a regular basis by the carp, and I can present any rig I want out there. But the problem with that is a lot of anglers are going to be doing the same thing. So come the autumn, they are treating them zones with caution. Well, that's what I believe anyway. So I'll often opt for more dirty, choddier areas in the autumn. But not only for that reason, but also obviously with the water temperature starting to decline, like we're in the middle of September now, autumn is nearly here, the weed's going to start dying back, which means the natural food is going to start diminishing. So picking them areas that are choddier, dirtier than them gravelly areas, they're going to be the last spots on the lake that hold that natural food. So I think presenting rigs out into them dirtier zones, you've got a much better chance of getting carp feeding with a lot more gusto, because obviously you've got the natural food larders there as well. The last thing I think about once I've located my spot is my bait and baiting approach. Now if you're fishing over really clean ground or gravel, you can get away with using pretty much anything. You can use smaller food items or particles, whereas today I've found a really silty area out there. It's lovely and smooth, but I don't want them fish almost filter feeding like they do on particles. They don't really move a lot, and I want them moving between mouthfuls. So I've opted for a boilie only approach. Now I'm using a couple of different size boilies. I've got a mixture of the Pacific tuna and the Pro-Stim liver, and I've got a couple of half baits in there, some whole baits and some 10 and 15s. So once I spot that out there, that's going to leave a nice spread of bait on the deck, and in return the fish are going to be moving between mouthfuls as opposed to sitting there static and just sucking and blowing. Well, after finding that spot yesterday, spending a lot of time having a good lead around, making sure I was happy with exactly what I wanted out there. Obviously we're coming into the autumn now, so I decided to choose a softer spot than I would sort of throughout the year, and it's paid off. I'm playing one. And to make things even sweeter, if we can get this in, I'm pretty sure this is the only bite that's been had in the past 48 hours. So out of everyone on the lake, from what I've been told by the bailiff. So yeah, fingers crossed we can get this in the net. At the minute it's just buried itself in a bit of weed, but a little bit of steady pressure and hopefully we'll get it moving. Well, I can't lie, that was the battle from hell. And the reason why you haven't seen the fish going into the net, don't worry, I have landed it, is because it got to about 25 yards out and then it just sort of went solid. but I could see the fish on the surface going up and down, sort of like on a weed line, but I couldn't gain anything on it. And then I managed to get out to probably 10 yards short of it, and there was a load of braid coming off of the back of the fish, which was tethered to my line. So what has happened is obviously someone's cracked off when they've been leading around, and their braid's still out in the lake with a lead on it. So the lead had obviously been pulled into the weed, and I couldn't gain anything on it. So after a bit of help from cameraman Key, as a joint effort, we have got a lovely, lovely mirror in the net. So yeah, I'm just gonna have a minute to compose myself, because that went on for over an hour, and we'll get it out and have a look at it. Wow, what a lovely way to finish my session down here at Horcott Lakes. A wonderful Cotswold scaly, probably mid to upper 20, and it just shows the importance of finding them spots, making sure they're presentable, and matching your approach to suit the spot that you're fishing. So yeah, I'm going to get him back on his way, hit the road, and I can't wait to return.